I never thought I'd be living with an alien. But here I am, sitting across from a creature that shouldn't even exist in my world, watching her curiously observe me like I'm the anomaly. Her name is Sana. She's from Velmara, a planet classified under highly advanced interstellar civilizations. The government has kept most details classified, but from what I gathered before signing the Intergalactic Cohabitation Initiative, Velmara is home to beings who have evolved beyond conventional reproduction. They manipulate their genetics to sustain their species. Sana, however, is here to study humanity's primitive ways. At least that's the official reason. When I first saw her, I thought they had sent a human by mistake. She looks almost normal. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face with strikingly human features. But then the differences start to stand out. The iridescent glow beneath her pale skin, the bioluminescent markings along her arms and collarbone, and the long prehensile tail that seems to move with a mind of its own. Her eyes are the most unnerving part. Silver, almost reflective, scanning me like I'm an organism under a microscope. I extend my hand out of politeness. Mark, I introduce. I, self. She tilts her head, analyzing the gesture before mimicking it. Her fingers are long and too smooth, almost like synthetic material rather than flesh. When she shakes my hand, her touch is cool. Too cool for normal body temperature. Sana, she responds, her voice smooth, almost artificial, like a precise AI simulation of human speech. I gesture to the apartment, a sleek tech-integrated unit in Neo-Tokyo, designed to accommodate both human and alien residents. I guess we're roommates now. She doesn't react. Instead, she steps past me, running her fingers along the walls, the furniture, the holographic kitchen interface. Every movement is deliberate, calculated. This structure is inefficient, she comments. I raise an eyebrow. Excuse me? She glances at me. Human living quarters. They do not optimize space effectively. I scoff. Welcome to Earth, I guess. We don't all live in bioengineered pods. She watches me for a moment, then smiles, but it's off. Too perfect. Like she's still figuring out how expressions work. It doesn't take long for me to realize that Sana isn't just here to observe. She's testing me. On the second day, I find her in the living room watching human interaction simulations on my holoscreen. Films, documentaries, old romance dramas. But the way she watches them, it's unnerving. Not for entertainment. She's studying. I lean against the wall, arms crossed. You're really into old-school human romance, huh? She doesn't look away. It is inefficient. I blink. Excuse me? She finally turns her gaze toward me, silver eyes flickering in the dim light. The process of human pair bonding. It is riddled with unnecessary emotional variables. Fear, uncertainty, hesitation. Your species complicates reproduction with abstract concepts such as love, loyalty, and morality. I frown. And that's bad? It is inefficient, she repeats, as if that explains everything. I try to brush off the unease creeping up my spine. Well, maybe inefficiency makes us human. Sana tilts her head as if considering this. Then she does something strange. Her tail coils slightly like a subconscious reaction. I've been around enough intergalactic species at the lab to recognize a non-human response to emotional triggers. Whatever she's thinking, it's stirring. Something within her that she isn't used to feeling. I wake up on the third night to an unfamiliar glow in my apartment. My instincts kick in. I reach for the pulse pistol hidden under my bed before creeping toward the source. The light is coming from my research console. My heart stops when I see her. Sana is standing in front of my workstation, fingers gliding through classified files on human genetics and reproduction. Her markings are glowing brighter, an eerie blue hue illuminating the dark space. She doesn't flinch when I step forward. Instead, she turns slowly, like she was expecting me. What are you doing? My voice is calm, but my fingers tighten around the pistol. Her expression is unreadable. Research. You hacked into my system. She doesn't deny it. I need to understand. Understand what? A pause. Then, for the first time since she arrived, she hesitates. It's subtle, but it's there. Why do humans place so much importance on this process, she finally asks, gesturing to the files. Breeding should be instinctive, efficient, and purpose-driven, yet humans attach emotions, rituals, and morality to it. Why? I don't know whether to be disturbed or intrigued. This isn't just about reproduction, is it? I take a step closer. You're not just here to observe. You're testing something. Her eyes flicker, the bioluminescence dimming slightly. Perhaps that single word sends a chill down my spine. This isn't just a cultural exchange program. There's something else happening here, something bigger. And I just became part of it. I sit in my room after she leaves, staring at my locked console. It takes me less than 10 minutes to realize that even though she exited the system, she left no trace of her access. That's not normal. That's advanced. Alien-level security clearance. She knew exactly what she was doing. I should report this, I should, but I don't. Because as much as this unsettles me, a part of me wants to know why she's really here. And more than that, why she seems to be enjoying it. I haven't reported her. I don't know why. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's something else. Either way, I've spent the last 2 days watching her just as much as she's watching me. Sana moves through my apartment like she's lived here forever. Every action is smooth, deliberate, and controlled. She never stumbles, never hesitates, except when emotions are involved. That's where the cracks begin to show. Last night I walked in on her watching another human film, one of those old romantic dramas where everything is over-exaggerated. Longing stares, stolen kisses, heartbreak. She wasn't just watching. She was studying. Her silver eyes flicked between characters, analyzing their interactions like a scientist observing a test subject. I sat down next to her without saying a word. She barely acknowledged me, too fixated on the screen. Then she asked something that made my stomach tighten. Do you believe love is a biological function, or is it merely an evolutionary flaw? I thought it was a joke at first, but she was serious. It's not a flaw, I said. It's what makes us human. Her gaze didn't waver. Then explain it to me. Scientifically. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. Love is complicated. It's not just hormones. It's connection, history, trust. It's unpredictable. Her fingers tapped against the armrest, thoughtful. Unpredictability is inefficient, yet humans thrive on it. Maybe some things aren't meant to be efficient. Sana didn't respond, but for the first time I saw something new in her expression. Frustration. Like she was running calculations in her head and none of them were adding up. Tonight I learned that her curiosity isn't just academic. It's personal. I found her in my lab. I had gone in late, needing to finish up some reports for a project unrelated to her, when I heard the faint hum of an active holographic display. No one else was supposed to be here. I crept inside, keeping my movements quiet. That's when I saw her. She was standing in front of my research station, surrounded by floating genetic models, human DNA, reproductive simulations, compatibility, charts. My work. But what sent a chill down my spine was the projection in the center of the display. A hybrid, a genetic combination of human and Velmaran DNA. It wasn't just theoretical. She had already begun mapping compatibility. I stepped forward, making my presence known. Sana. She didn't flinch, didn't try to hide what she was doing. She simply turned to face me, her expression unreadable. You shouldn't be here, I said, though I already knew she didn't care about that. I needed to confirm something. I crossed my arms. Which is? She gestured toward the projection. Our species should not be compatible, yet your genetic structure suggests otherwise. There is potential for hybridization. I felt my breath catch. You were testing this? Yes. I stared at her, waiting for more, but she simply watched me with that unsettling, calm intensity. Why? I asked finally. Sana hesitated. A flicker of something crossed her face, an emotion she didn't fully understand. My species has evolved beyond reproduction, she said, voice quieter than before. We do not form bonds. We do not create life as you do. We sustain ourselves through genetic manipulation, replication, and artificial engineering. She stepped closer. But humans, you create, you feel, you connect. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. And that interests you? It fascinates me. The way she said it made my skin prickle. It wasn't just fascination, it was something more, something deeper. Does the Velmoran Council know about this? Her silence told me everything. I felt the weight of what was happening settle in my chest. She hadn't just come here to study humans. She came here to test something, to see if she could experience what had long been lost to her species. I should have walked away. I should have reported her right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I met her gaze, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that I never expected to see: uncertainty, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of fear. I should have said no. I should have put a stop to this before it started. But when Sana asked me to help her, I hesitated. Not because I was afraid. Not because I didn't understand the implications. I hesitated because, for the first time since she arrived, she wasn't speaking like a scientist. She was speaking like someone who wanted to feel something real. It started in the lab. After I caught her running hybridization models, she didn't deny it. She didn't hide. She simply turned off the display, walked toward me, and said 5 words that sent a chill down my spine. I want to try it. I stared at her, heart hammering. Try what? You know what. Her voice was steady, controlled, but her tail curled slightly behind her, a sign of anticipation, or something more. I exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of my neck. Sana, this isn't an experiment. You can just run and analyze. She tilted her head. Why not? Because emotions aren't controlled variables. They're messy. They change. They evolve. She took another step forward. The glow under her skin pulsed faintly, like an organic heartbeat. I want to understand, fully. My throat went dry. Sana, this isn't just about understanding. What you're asking for is necessary, she interrupted. For me, for my species. We have lost something fundamental, and I believe humans still possess it. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to keep up with where this was going. What exactly have you lost? She hesitated. For the first time, her confident facade cracked, and then she said something that changed everything. The ability to desire. The words hit me like a shockwave. Velmorans don't have natural reproduction. They genetically modify their offspring, choosing traits, optimizing perfection. But over time, their species lost something essential, the instinct to want. No longing, no passion, no emotional connection, just cold, calculated creation. Sana was here to see if that could be reversed, and now she wanted to use me to test it. Should have walked away. I should have told her this was impossible, that what she wanted wasn't something you could engineer in a lab. But I didn't. Because deep down, a part of me wondered the same thing. We returned to the apartment in silence. The air between us was charged, thick with an unspoken tension. I sat down on the couch, running my fingers through my hair. Let's say, hypothetically, I agree to this experiment. What exactly would it involve? Sana sat across from me, hands resting on her knees. Full immersion. I frowned. Meaning? She lifted her hand. A small, sleek device rested between her fingers, a delicate, translucent neural chip no bigger than a grain of rice. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. You want to link our minds? Yes, she said, watching me closely. This device allows shared sensory and emotional experiences. It will synchronize neural responses between us, enabling me to fully understand what it means to feel human attraction, connection, and... She hesitated on the last word. Intimacy. I exhaled slowly. This isn't just about science anymore. Is it? She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before. I don't know. That scared me more than anything, because it meant she wasn't sure if she was still following her mission, or if she was beginning to act on something she didn't fully understand. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop it. We sat in silence for a long time. The chip rested between us like a ticking time bomb. Finally, I picked it up, rolling it between my fingers. If I do this, you need to promise me something. She leaned forward slightly. What? I met her gaze. No data collection, no hidden transmissions to your council. If this is real, it stays between us. She held my stare, the silver in her eyes flickering like distant stars. Then, slowly, she nodded. I swallowed the lump in my throat. All right. I pressed the chip against my temple. A sharp electric pulse shot through my skull, then everything went black, and when I woke up I wasn't alone in my own mind anymore. The experience was unlike anything I've ever known. It wasn't just sensory. It wasn't just a connection between two minds. It was as if we were sharing the same body, the same emotions, the same thoughts, at the same time. I could feel her confusion, the way she tried to make sense of every reaction that wasn't logical, the warmth of my own skin, the way my heart raced at the slightest thought of her, the intensity of attraction, things I've always taken for granted, things I never questioned. And she felt it all. Every shift, every sensation. At first I thought I could control it. I thought I could compartmentalize the experience, keep it professional. This was an experiment after all. But it wasn't. I couldn't. I've never been this close to someone. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I could feel every heartbeat of hers syncing with mine, and it was almost overwhelming. Her touch was electric, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Curiosity mixed with wonder, with something deeper. She didn't know what to do with it. I woke up to the sound of my own breath, heavy and fast. The chip was gone. I was alone again, but not really. There was a residue, an aftertaste of what we shared lingering in the back of my mind. Sana was sitting at the edge of the couch staring at me. Her skin was flushed, her chest rising and falling more rapidly than usual. Her silver eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, she wasn't calculating. She wasn't analyzing. She was just feeling. Her voice broke the silence. It was overwhelming. I swallowed. I know. She looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. I thought I would be able to control it. I thought I could keep it controlled. She seemed to pause, reflecting on the words, as if she was still learning to understand the emotions she had just experienced. But I couldn't. I couldn't control it. The sensations were too much. I nodded slowly, still trying to make sense of the shared experience. Yeah, I felt it too. The attraction, the heat. It was almost too much. She blinked at me, her head tilting slightly, as if she was processing the words. Why do humans do this? Why does it feel so intense? So consuming? I hesitated, unsure how to answer. How do you explain attraction to someone who's never felt it? How do you make sense of something that's always been a natural part of life, but that feels so alien to her? I don't know, I said softly. It's just part of being human. It's how we connect. She nodded, but there was a depth in her eyes that said she was still trying to figure out what that really meant. Then, to my surprise, she leaned closer, her silver eyes never leaving mine. I felt it, Mark. I felt you. Her words were quiet, almost a whisper, but they landed heavily in the air between us. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just her usual cold curiosity anymore. There was something raw, something vulnerable in her gaze. She wasn't just a scientist anymore. She wasn't just here to collect data. She was here for something more. We spent the rest of the evening in silence. She didn't want to talk about what had happened. Neither did I. The space between us felt different now. Charged, electric, but also strangely delicate. Neither of us seemed to want to acknowledge the reality of what we had just experienced. But the silence didn't last long. The next morning, Sana was waiting for me when I woke up. This time, there was no scientific curiosity in her eyes. There was something else. Something almost primal. "Mark," she said, her voice low, almost hesitant. "I need to understand more." I blinked, still groggy from sleep. "Understand what?" She stepped closer, her presence undeniable. "I want to understand what you feel, not just the attraction. Everything. What it feels like to want someone." Her words sent a wave of heat through me, a wave I couldn't control. I stood up, backing away slightly. "Sana, we can't. This isn't just about feelings." But she didn't back down. Her tail swished behind her, the iridescent glow beneath her skin pulsing with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "I felt your desire, Mark. I felt it in me. And now, I want to feel it more. I want to understand why humans need this, why it's so powerful." Her gaze held mine, unwavering. There was something almost pleading in her eyes. "Please." I should have said no. I should have told her that what we were doing was crossing a line, that the experiment had gone too far, but there was something in the way she looked at me, something that made my resolve falter. I wasn't just a scientist to her anymore. I wasn't just a subject in her experiment. I was someone she wanted. Before I could respond, she took another step forward, closing the space between us. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, the intensity of her emotions swirling around me like a magnetic field. She reached out, her fingers brushing against my arm, and that single touch sent a jolt through me. "Sana," I started, but she stopped me. "Don't speak," she whispered. "Just feel." Her hand slid up my arm, and for the first time I felt the full weight of what was happening between us. It wasn't just an experiment anymore. It was real, it was raw, and it was terrifying. She tilted her head, studying me as if waiting for me to make the next move. But in that moment I couldn't think. All I could do was feel. Feel the pull between us, feel her presence, her desire, and my own. The lines between us were starting to blur, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist. Her voice, barely a whisper, came again. "Do you want this too, Mark?" I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. But when I opened them again, I saw only her. And I knew then that I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop anymore. I don't know when it happened. I don't know at what point the experiment stopped being about science and started being about us. But it's real now. It's undeniable. There's a tension between us now that can't be ignored. It pulses in the air, in every touch, every look, every word. It's no longer just curiosity on her part, nor is it purely my fear of crossing boundaries. We're tangled up in something much bigger than that. It started with the way she looked at me this morning. Sana had always been composed, controlled. But today there was something different. She stood in front of the mirror, her eyes focused on her reflection, but it wasn't her usual analytical stare. She was studying herself as if trying to understand the emotions that had taken root inside her. I noticed the way her chest rose and fell, how her fingers traced the contours of her own face as if she were trying to map out feelings, something entirely new to her. I watched from the doorway, heart racing, unsure of how to even begin a conversation. Finally, she turned to face me. There was no guard, no scientific coldness, just raw vulnerability. "Mark," she said quietly, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "I don't know how to stop this." The words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just an experiment anymore. It wasn't about understanding or studying anymore. Sana was lost in this as much as I was. I took a step closer, but she held up a hand, signaling for me to stop. "No, don't come closer." She almost sounded desperate, but she wasn't asking for distance. She was asking for clarity. I nodded, holding back my instinct to bridge the gap between us. "Then what do you want, Sana?" Her eyes softened, a faint sadness flickering in them. I want to know what it feels like to be human, to desire someone, to be connected. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. But I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can keep control. It was the first time I had heard her speak with uncertainty, with a fear that wasn't about logic or analysis. It was raw, emotional, and for the first time I could see the true weight of what she was asking me. I reached out instinctively, closing the distance between us. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't stay away any longer. As my hand touched her arm, she shivered under my touch and my heart stuttered. She looked up at me, eyes wide with a mix of fear and something deeper. Need. Mark, I feel like I'm losing myself in this. Her voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared. Her fear was so palpable that it struck me to my core. I wanted to reassure her. I wanted to promise her that it was okay, that I wasn't just a scientist, studying her. I wanted to tell her I wasn't just going to abandon her like a project. But how could I say that? How could I promise something I wasn't sure I could keep? Sana, I said softly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. You don't have to be scared. I won't leave you. But we can't keep pretending this is just an experiment. It's not. We're both involved now. This is real. Her silver eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw something like trust in them. But that trust came with the weight of something much bigger, something neither of us had the answers to. She stepped closer, and this time I didn't pull away. We were standing there, inches apart, feeling the warmth of each other's presence, the tension hanging thick in the air. It was impossible to ignore. I don't know how to go back, she whispered. I don't know how to stop this once I've started. Once I've felt it. I could feel the words in my chest. It was a plea, a confession, and a surrender. Sana wasn't just asking for answers anymore. She was asking for me. I don't want you to stop, I said quietly, the words coming before I could stop them. But we have to be careful. This is bigger than either of us. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned in closer, her breath mingling with mine. There was no more space between us, no more distance. Just the raw connection that had been building since that first day in the lab. And then she kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like she was still testing the waters. But it didn't take long for the kiss to deepen, for the sensations to flood us both. Her lips were warm like nothing I had ever known, and her touch sent shockwaves through my entire body. I could feel her emotions swirling around me, feel the desire she had never experienced before now fully unleashed. For a brief moment, it was like nothing else existed. There were no experiments, no hidden agendas, no fear. Just two people. Two beings, one human and one alien, connected by something far more primal than logic or reason. When we finally pulled away, breathless and disoriented, there was no more doubt. I wasn't just part of her experiment anymore. I was part of her, and for better or worse, we had both crossed a line. There was no turning back. Sana didn't say anything after that. She didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It wasn't heavy. It was understanding. But even in that understanding, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both in uncharted territory. The ground beneath us felt unstable, like we were walking on a tightrope, and one misstep could make everything crumble. Yet there was something compelling about it, something that kept pulling me forward, toward her. As much as I tried to resist, as much as I knew this could end in disaster, I couldn't help it. I wanted her. And for the first time, I was beginning to wonder if maybe she wanted me back. It's like being caught in a whirlwind, one that pulls you in with all the intensity of a storm and leaves you with nothing but a feeling of weightlessness. No anchor, no point of return. And I'm no longer sure if I even want to find my way back. I don't know when the lines blurred. I don't know exactly when the scientist in Sana became less of a subject and more of someone I wanted to hold, to protect, to feel more of. It was subtle at first. Her proximity, the way her fingers brushed against mine when she thought I wasn't looking, how she watched me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. her gaze filled with something I couldn't name. But now, it's impossible to ignore. I can feel it in everything. The heat that coils around us when we're together, the stolen glances, the unsaid things that hang between us like a secret we're both keeping. It's impossible to know what to do with this, what to do with her. We had another one of our sessions in the lab today. I didn't even know what to call them anymore. They weren't experiments, and they sure as hell weren't just scientific exchanges. Sana had insisted we test the device again to see how much further the emotional connection could go. We had been building up slowly, almost cautiously, at least that's what I told myself. There had been a distance at first, a line between us that I thought we could never cross. But as we reconnected, tested, and explored, that line had slowly melted away. I looked at her as she approached me in the lab, her usual calm demeanor returning after yesterday's kiss. But this time, I saw the edge of uncertainty in her eyes. The look of someone who wasn't sure what their next step should be. "Mark," she said softly, her voice almost tentative. "I need to know if this is real." It took me a moment to process her words. I could feel the weight of them. This wasn't just about the experiment anymore. It was about us. What we were becoming. I had no answers for her. Hell, I didn't even have answers for myself. But I stepped toward her. "I think it's real." My words sounded weak in comparison to the way my body was reacting to the closeness between us. It felt inevitable. She nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. "But I need to understand, Mark. I need to feel it the way you do." Before I could stop myself, I took her hands in mine. I didn't think. I didn't plan it. I just did it. The warmth of her skin against mine sent a surge through my chest. "Feel it the way I do," I repeated, looking down at our hands, intertwined. "Sana, what do you mean?" Her voice trembled just slightly as she answered. "I need to feel it in my core. The connection, the desire." And then it hit me. She wasn't just talking about emotion anymore. She was talking about something else. I stared at her for a long moment, my thoughts racing. This wasn't just about trying to understand human emotions. She wasn't looking for an academic answer anymore. She was looking for something deeper, something intimate, something that could cross both physical and emotional boundaries. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. She wanted more than just the data. She wanted me, the way I had already let myself want her. I hesitated for only a second before I nodded. "Okay." We sat down on the couch, the silence between us thick with anticipation. There was no going back now. There was no pretending we weren't both consumed by the same desire. I could see it in her eyes as she looked at me. No longer the scientist, no longer the curious outsider. She was here with me, fully present, no walls between us. Her fingers brushed my jaw and I closed my eyes at the touch. The simple gesture felt like it was pulling something from deep inside me. I wanted her, wanted to feel everything with her. It was all-consuming, and for the first time, I wasn't sure how to fight it. "Sana," I whispered, my voice thick with longing. "I'm not sure where this is going, but I can't stop wanting you." She leaned in, her lips barely brushing mine as she spoke. "I don't want you to stop." Her voice was almost a plea. "I don't want to feel this alone. I want to experience everything with you." I couldn't resist anymore. I kissed her. It was different this time. Not tentative. Not uncertain. This time, it was a desire that had been building up for so long, waiting to be released. Her hands slid around my neck, pulling me closer, and I could feel the warmth of her body against mine, the intensity of her emotions flooding me. This wasn't just a kiss. This was everything. I felt her pull away just for a moment, her breathing heavy. "Mark," she whispered, looking into my eyes. "I've never felt like this before. I don't know what this is, but I don't want it to stop." I want to understand it. I want to feel it all. I didn't know what to say. I didn't have answers, but I couldn't let go of her now. I kissed her again, deeper this time, unable to resist the pull between us. My hands tangled in her hair, and I felt her body press against mine, soft and warm, each movement bringing us closer to something beyond words. I couldn't explain it, but it didn't matter. We were beyond explanations now. By the time we stopped, both of us breathless and tangled in a mix of emotions, the reality of what we'd done settled over me. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was everything. Sana had crossed the line. I had crossed the line. And now there was no way to go back to what we had before. The experiment had ended, and all that was left was us. Whatever we were now. I could feel her heartbeat in my chest, feel the pull of her desire in every inch of me, and for the first time I didn't want to fight it. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to let her go. We were lost in this together, and maybe, just maybe, that was the only truth that mattered. I can feel it, the pressure closing in. Everything we've done, everything we've shared is unraveling around us, faster than I can catch my breath. Sana is no longer just a subject of study. She's not just an alien or an experiment. She's become something more, and I can't even begin to figure out what that means. But the world outside doesn't care about our bond. The government found out. It wasn't supposed to happen. The project was classified. The work I was doing with Sana was supposed to stay hidden. But someone leaked the information. Now the authorities are here and they're moving fast. The knock at the door came in the middle of the night. Loud, forceful, urgent. I barely had time to think. I heard the distinct hiss of drones outside the window and the unmistakable sound of military boots on the stairs. My heart raced, blood pounding in my ears. They were here. They had tracked us down. Sana was already awake. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her body tense, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dark. "They know, Mark," she whispered, voice hoarse with fear. "They found us." I had been expecting this, but that didn't mean I was ready. There was no plan, no backup. Just me and her, caught in the middle of something far bigger than we could have imagined. I grabbed her hand, pulling her to her feet. "We need to leave. Now." Her eyes were wide with panic, but she nodded, trust in every movement. As she followed me through the narrow hallways of our apartment, I heard the metallic clang of the drones outside. The building would be surrounded. There was no escaping the authorities quietly. I didn't have time to think about it. I didn't have time to plan. All I could do was run. We ran through the winding streets of Neo-Tokyo, a labyrinth of bright neon signs and towering skyscrapers. The city was alive, too exposed. Every corner we turned, every shadow we ducked behind, felt like it could be our last. The drones were everywhere, their hums buzzing above us like a swarm of insects. The military forces had locked down the city, and no one was allowed to leave. I could feel the sweat on my brow, the weight of the decision I had made. Helping her escape wasn't just an act of defiance against the government. It was an act of betrayal. I was betraying my duty, my work, everything I had spent my life building. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Sana mattered. She was breathing hard beside me, her pace quick but steady. The fear I saw in her eyes was palpable. For the first time since I had met her, I realized that she didn't just fear capture, she feared losing me. "Mark," she panted, her voice strained. "They're closing in. We need to do something, quickly." I could see it in her eyes. Desperation. She didn't know how to escape. She didn't know the city. She didn't know the tactics. But she trusted me to lead us out of this mess. I grabbed her by the arm, pulling her into a side alley just as a pair of drones passed overhead. "Stay quiet. Follow my lead," I whispered, my voice shaking with urgency. "I know the way." But even as I said it, I knew that we didn't have much time. The longer we stayed in the open, the greater the chance we'd be caught. And then, something I couldn't have expected happened. As we turned another corner, narrowly avoiding a group of armed soldiers, Sana's body suddenly tensed. She froze, her eyes closing for a moment as if concentrating on something inside her. I barely had time to react when her form shifted. The air around her shimmered, like a ripple in the atmosphere itself. I took a step back, stunned. The girl I had known, the alien I had tried to protect, was changing in front of my eyes. Her features shifted as though she were dissolving into something else entirely. Her skin became human, her silver eyes fading into a shade of brown. Her body shrank and adjusted, the alien features I had grown accustomed to disappearing in a fluid, almost magical transformation. Within seconds, she no longer looked like the Sana I had been running with. She looked like any other human, a perfect, unremarkable woman who blended into the city as if she had always belonged here. Sana. What? She opened her now human eyes and turned to me, her expression calm but still filled with that same unspoken intensity. I don't know how it happened, Mark, but I can feel it. I can feel myself. I feel human. I stared at her, my mind racing. How did you do this? How could you? I don't know, she interrupted, her voice quiet but steady. But I can control it. I wanted to blend in, Mark. I wanted to be someone you could hide with, someone who could escape. I swallowed hard, trying to process what was happening. Sana wasn't just an alien anymore. She was becoming human, not just in appearance but in essence. Her ability to morph, to adapt, to hide. This wasn't something she had ever mentioned before. This was new, a power beyond my understanding. But there was something deeper in what she said, something that resonated with me in a way I couldn't ignore. She wasn't just doing this for the escape. She was doing it to be with me. And that realization hit harder than I could have expected. Sana, you're human. In more ways than one. She finished for me, her voice softer now, as if she had finally accepted the truth of her own transformation. I didn't know what this meant, for us, for her, for the future, but I did know one thing. We were in this together, and now, more than ever, there was no turning back. We had to keep running, keep escaping. But for the first time, I wasn't just running for my life. I was running for her, for us. And with every step we took, I realized that Sana wasn't just an alien anymore. She wasn't just an experiment. She was everything. As we sprinted through the streets of Neo-Tokyo, evading drones and soldiers alike, I could feel the weight of the decision I had made pressing down on me. But in the chaos of that moment, there was only one thing that mattered. Sana, the woman beside me. The woman who had gone from alien to human, from an enigma to something I couldn't even describe. Together, we had crossed lines that no one else could have imagined. And now, with the world after us, we had to figure out what our future looked like. Because there was no going back, we were already beyond that point. The city is silent now. The chaos has faded into the background, and for the first time in days, I can hear my own thoughts. The constant hum of the drones, the military sirens, the pounding of my heart as Sana and I ran through the streets. It's all gone. There's only one thing left, a decision, a choice that neither of us wanted to make, but one that fate has forced upon us. We found ourselves standing in front of the spaceport, the last chance. A high-tech structure built on the outskirts of Neo-Tokyo, shielded by layers of security, bustling with cargo ships and people preparing to leave Earth. Sana's mission was clear. Leave. Return to her home planet. I didn't know what to think. For weeks, she had been the most important thing in my life. We had shared everything: fear, trust, pain, and love. We had changed. But the reality was here, in front of us, in the form of a cold, sterile shuttle waiting to take her away. You have to go, Mark, Sana said, her voice almost a whisper. Her eyes met mine, searching for something, but I could see the same conflict within her that mirrored my own. This is the only way. If I stay, Earth will be in danger. If I leave, we may never see each other again. I could feel the weight of her words pressing on me, suffocating me with the enormity of the decision I had to make. Would I leave everything behind for her, forsaking Earth, forsaking humanity? Or would I let her go and ensure that the planet she had come to love remained safe? I don't want you to leave, I said, my voice raw. I don't want to lose you, Sana, but I don't know if I can leave everything behind. She stepped closer, her presence enveloping me, and for a moment, I didn't feel like we were standing on a cold, metallic platform. I didn't feel the harshness of the situation. I only felt her, the person who had somehow become my heart. Mark, if you come with me, you will never see Earth again. You'll leave your people, your world. You'll live among strangers, among my people. It's a life I don't think you're ready for. Her words hung in the air between us, unspoken truths. She was right. I wasn't ready to leave Earth behind. But was I ready to let her go? Sana's gaze softened, and I saw the flicker of tears in her eyes. If you stay, Mark, I will erase all traces of our experiment. I'll remove any evidence that you ever worked with me. The world will be safe, but we will never be able to come back. You will live your life as if nothing ever happened. You will forget me, and I will disappear into the stars. There it was, the choice. If I stayed, I would have to bury this all. The love, the connection, the memories. It would be gone, erased. And if I left with her, I would be walking away from everything I had ever known. The world would be left in turmoil and I might never return. My heart screamed in protest, but in my gut I knew the answer. The world needed to survive. She needed to survive. The future was uncertain, and as much as I loved her, I had to make the choice that would save us all. Sana, I whispered, my voice shaking. I can't come with you. I have to stay. Her face crumpled for the briefest moment, and she reached out to touch my cheek as if trying to memorize my face before she left. I understand, Mark. I've known all along that this would be our fate. You'll be safer here, and so will Earth. I swallowed the lump in my throat, feeling the sting of loss already threatening to swallow me whole. But I knew she was right. I'll make sure they forget about you, about everything we've done. Her fingers brushed my lips, and for a moment there was nothing but us. No more choices, no more duties, just love, fragile and fleeting. Thank you, Mark, she said, her voice a soft tremor. You've given me a future I never thought I'd have. You gave me more than I could have ever asked for. Her words cut through me like a blade. I'll always love you, Sana. Always. Sana stepped back, her face already hardening into the resolve I had seen so many times before. She turned toward the shuttle, her steps slow, but steady. I could barely breathe as I watched her walk away. The door to the shuttle closed behind her with a soft hiss. I stood there, frozen, watching as the ship slowly ascended into the night sky. And with it, my future. But just as the shuttle's engines powered up and it started to disappear into the stars, something unexpected happened. A soft beep echoed in my earpiece, a sound I had almost forgotten. I turned to see a small device, a genetic sample, hidden under my jacket. It wasn't much, just a small vial, but I knew exactly what it meant. Sana had left me something. A trace of our bond. A genetic sample. It wasn't just a token. It was a promise. She had given me the key to everything. A way for us to connect across the stars. A way for her species and humanity to finally find common ground. And maybe, just maybe someday someone would discover that connection. That piece of us, a future where love and survival weren't at odds. Where the boundaries between species didn't have to be so clear. I looked up at the sky, the stars now filling the empty space around me. The shuttle was gone, and I was alone. But I wasn't truly alone. I had her, with me, in my heart, in my future. And in time, maybe the world would understand. Maybe they would know what we had. The love that had started as a scientific experiment but had grown into something far more meaningful. As the night stretched on, I stood there, staring up at the stars, unsure whether I had lost a lover or saved humanity from an uncertain fate. But I knew one thing: Sana's legacy, our legacy, would live on no matter what, and that was enough. End of journal.